Hey everyone, and welcome back to Rank and File Sports. And today we're going to be hopping right back into our series where we are predicting every single Power 4 team's record by the start of the college football season. So please make sure to like and subscribe as we will be uploading videos daily. Now, Clemson made headlines this past season because Dabo Sweeney decided that he did not want to take any transfers into the program, making them the only program outside of the service academies to not get a single transfer. So this year is going to be really interesting to see if that starts to affect them in a negative way because they refuse to adapt to the changing college football landscape, or if Clemson can kind of become more of the same team that we saw a few years ago before that loss to Ohio State in the playoff semifinals. The start to the season is very difficult for Clemson with a matchup in Atlanta against Georgia. It's technically a neutral site game, but this is really going to be pretty much a home game for Georgia. It's going to be packed with Georgia fans. Very tough environment, incredibly difficult game to start the year, and it's going to be a really tough game for Clemson to win. Appalachian State at home should be a nice break after that game, and they have a bye week to prepare for NC State. I think NC State's going to be good this year. They'll definitely have a chance to contend in the ACC, but I think Clemson at home will be the favorites in this game. Stanford at home shouldn't be much of a problem. They're new to the ACC this year. They're going to be traveling a lot. I think that definitely could affect their performance, so I wouldn't worry too much about that one. But this next road trip to Florida State's going to be a really difficult game for Clemson. Definitely one to watch out for there. I think Florida State's also going to be a really good team in contention for the ACC, so that game could be pretty tough. Wake Forest on the road, not so much. I think Wake will be all right, but I think Clemson's just probably going to have enough talent to be able to take care of that one, even though it's a road matchup. Virginia's just really not very good. I don't see them going on the road beating Clemson. And they get one more bye week before another potentially difficult matchup at home against Louisville. Louisville, I do think, is going to be pretty decent this year. They made the ACC championship last year against Florida State, and they held their own in that game, although Florida State was without Jordan Travis. But I think it'll probably be tougher for them to get back there this year. Just with the way all the different schedules look, it's hard to imagine Louisville beating all the other teams except one in records and not losing a tiebreaker. There's a lot of things that would have to go their way, including probably winning this game against Clemson. And I think Clemson at home definitely going to be the favorites. There's upset potential, but it's not very high. The road trip to Virginia Tech could be a potentially troubling game for Clemson. Um, This one's really tough to tell. There's some people who have been putting Virginia Tech in their preseason top 25s. I don't think they're quite that good, but they're definitely going to be a team to watch out for as somebody who is capable of pulling off an upset like this. The road trip to Pitt shouldn't be too terrible. I think Clemson's definitely going to be favorites in that game, probably by double digits. The Citadel at home, nothing much to say there. That's a cakewalk for sure. And then the rivalry matchup against South Carolina, also at home this year, so not as much need to worry for that game. Still think it'll probably be a good game. South Carolina will be all right, but without Spencer Rattler anymore, I don't think they'll put up as much of a fight against Clemson. So they have a total of 7 home games and 4 away games with that neutral site game against Georgia to start the season, like I mentioned, and a total of 4 opponents ranked in the top 25, which we released about 2 weeks ago. And this gives them a schedule difficulty of 7 out of 10.
Checking out the guaranteed wins for the Clemson Tigers in 2024, we start off with the Appalachian State Mountaineers. This is not the App State from a couple years ago where they went into College Station and upset Texas A&M. It's highly unlikely that they're able to go into Death Valley and pull off an upset this year. As far as the Stanford Cardinal are concerned, they famously were losing 29-0 to Colorado last year and pulled off an outstanding comeback, one for the ages, in a multiple overtime thriller. But this won't happen against Clemson. Clemson's defense will be stout as always. This is a prove it year for Cade Klubnik and a make or break year for Dabo Sweeney's status as currently not on the hot seat. And then as far as the Citadel, that one goes without saying. No disrespect to the Citadel, but an FCS opponent's no match for a team like Clemson. Taking a look at the likely wins for these Tigers, we start off with Wake Forest. These are not the same Demon Deacons that made it all the way to the ACC Championship game a couple years ago. For one thing, Sam Hartman's not their quarterback anymore, and he hasn't been since 2022, so it's not a super realistic expectation to expect Wake to hang around with Clemson for longer than 2.5 quarters at the most. With Virginia's been down for a few years now, so while they may be starting to kind of find their traction in the ACC, it probably will take them at least one more year to finally show that. Really tough to expect them to beat Clemson when all of that information is considered. With Louisville, they are one of the up and coming programs in the ACC. They did make it all the way to the ACC title game last year before losing to Florida State in a very hard fought game where both defenses played lights out. Just this year, they will likely take a small step back, and knowing that does give Clemson a slight advantage in our eyes. As far as Virginia Tech, this team will be much better than they were last year, but Clemson, by this time, it'll be late in the season. Even in Blacksburg, we think the Tigers win in a close one. Pitt, rebuilding team, far from the same team they were 2 years ago with Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison headlining the offense. Really would be a shock if they were able to pull off the upset against Clemson. And then South Carolina, their quarterback Spencer Rattler was just drafted to the NFL. Really tough to expect them to go into Death Valley and win, unlike what they did in 2022, which was pull off the upset. So anything's possible, but we don't think it's going to happen this year. Looking at our toss-ups, our first one is the NC State Wolfpack. The Wolfpack added quarterback Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina in the transfer portal this offseason, which is a huge addition for this offense. They will be clicking in 2024, and that does give them some potential to beat Clemson. However, we just think the Tigers will be too much for them in the end, but look for this game to be a very closely contested battle. As far as Florida State goes, this game is in Tallahassee, so we expect the Noles to come away with this win, but both teams have ran the ACC for years. We think that this is another year where both teams are near the top of their conference, and it just comes down to the home field for Florida State. But this game is an absolute toss-up. Really tough to choose the winner here. Finally, the lone likely loss for these Tigers is the opening week matchup against the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia's just a juggernaut, especially on defense. I think this game is going to be a tough one for Clemson. Honestly, some blowout potential here. The Dogs could be looking at a 45-10 win. This game could go south for Clemson quickly if Cade Klubnik isn't able to keep his composure. But it's hard to bet against Dabo's ability to scheme, so there's always the possibility that this game could be closer than people think. But we have the Dogs winning this one pretty comfortably, despite that fact.
Taking a look at the schedule recap, we do have Clemson losing that game to start the season against Georgia. I think it will probably be a good matchup for at least the first half. Cade Klubnik's a good quarterback. But in the end, I think the Georgia defense is going to be too good, and I think that Carson Beck-led offense is also just going to be too much for Clemson to handle. The game's in Atlanta, that certainly doesn't help, so we do have the Bulldogs winning that one. The next three, I do think Clemson will be able to pick up. The NC State game is one to watch out for. That definitely has some upset potential, But the fact that Clemson's at home, I think, is going to be enough to push them over the edge and give them the win in that game. The road trip to Florida State, however, that's also going to be a really close game. But I think the Seminoles are going to be slight favorites in that one. Once again, due to the home field advantage. And I just think Florida State and Clemson are going to be pretty similar talent-wise. So in the end, you have to give it to the home team. So we're going to go with Florida State in that one. The road trip to Wake Forest and the home game against Virginia both aren't very tough matchups. So I'm not too worried about either of those for Clemson. And then they have one more bye week for that game against Louisville, like I mentioned. That one's another one to watch out for as a potential upset. If they do finish with 3 losses, maybe that would be the one, or NC State. One of those two would definitely be my pick. But I do think Clemson does have enough to get the win at home. If it was a road game, it might be a different story, but it's not, so we're going to go ahead and give Clemson the win. The next 2 road trips, the one at Virginia Tech we should definitely watch out for. That's got some upset potential for sure. As you can see, we only have Clemson at a 75% chance to win that one. I think it'll be close until maybe the fourth quarter. Clemson pulls away and gets the win. But definitely watch out for that one as a potential upset. The road trip to Pitt, I'm not as worried about. I think Pitt's going to be okay this year, but not quite good enough to win, even though they're at home. I just think Clemson will be good enough to get that one done. The Citadel, that's an obvious 100% win. No scenario where Clemson loses that game. And South Carolina, I think, will be a win for Clemson. That game also has the potential to be close going into the second half, but I don't think it'll be like that by the time the fourth quarter rolls around. I think Clemson will be able to pull away and get the win. So this gives Clemson a record of 10-2. When you add up all the percentages, we have a projected record of 9.05 and 2.95. This is a little bit higher than FPI. They have Clemson at 8.5 and 3.5, so somewhere in between 3 and 4 losses. That's definitely possible. I think 8 and 4 would be their floor if they do lose both the NC State and the Louisville games. Potentially the Virginia Tech one, but I don't think they'd lose all 3. I think it'd just be 2 out of those 3 if they somehow did hit their floor for the year. And then they have a 26.9% chance to make the playoffs and a 1.4% chance to make the national championship. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next video tomorrow.